What's up, guys? Moving on. Alright, we're in Genesis chapter 37 now. Alright, we're probably going to finish this chapter in this video. Alright, without further ado, grab your Bibles and follow along. If you don't have a Bible, no worries, I'll read out the verses anyway. I'm on the NIV version. Before we start, let's do a quick prayer, alright? Father, I pray as we read your word that you sanctify us by your truth. Your word is truth. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Alrighty, chapter 37, Genesis. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Right, so Jacob settles in Canaan. Right, Joseph, age 17, right, reports his brother's wrongdoing. Right, Jacob favors him and gives him a special robe. Right, and his brothers hate him. Right, and they cannot, speak peaceful to him. Right. Now this robe wasn't just like a symbol or just a piece of clothing, right? It said you are distinct, right? You are favored, and you are different than your brothers, right? And Joseph's moral integrity, right, exposed his brother's corruption, right? His father favoritism just amplified it, right? So hatred often grows from comparison, right? Instead of examining their own lives, the brothers target Joseph, right? And notice they could not speak peaceably to him, right? That's like a warning sign, right? When resentment matures to the point that basic kindness, starts to disappear, right? And danger creeps in nice and close. Verse 5. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brother, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Right, so Joseph dreams that his brothers' sheaves bow to his, right? Then he dreams the sun, moon, and stars bow to him. Right, his brothers hate him more, right? And Jacob rebukes him, but keeps the matter in mind. Right? These dreams were from God. Right? But Joseph, he lacked wisdom on how to handle these dreams. Right? Truth delivered without discernment, right, can inflame rather than, edify, right? It doesn't necessarily mean, right, he wasn't sinful, right, he was just immature, right? Meanwhile, the brothers react not by asking, "Oh, is this from God?" but by deepening their envy and anger towards him, right? And the contrast of this is the brothers focus on pride, right, and Jacob focuses on possibility, right? So the brothers envious, right, it blinds them, right? And faith ponders. And these dreams aren't about, Joseph's ego. They are about God's plan, right? But destiny revealed early often creates hostility, right, before fulfillment. Verse 12. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. So he said to him, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks?" They have moved on from here. The man answered, I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. Right, so Jacob sends Joseph, to check on his brother at Shechem. Right, Joseph travels over 70 miles, right, to find them. So Joseph's obedience, right, it stands out. He goes willingly and he searches persistently, right? He walks into danger unknowingly, right? This is a pattern of the righteous, right? Obedience first, right? Obey first and then understand everything after, right? And also notice how he travels from Hebron to Shechem, right? The same Shechem where blood was shed in the previous chapter, right? So history lingers in geography, right? Joseph walks into territory, right, charged with unresolved tension. Verse 18. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of those cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty, there was no water in it. Right? So the brothers see Joseph from afar, right, and conspire to kill him. Right? Reuben intervenes and suggests throwing him into a pit instead, intending to rescue him later. Right? So they strip his robe, right, and they throw him into an empty cistern. Now the words before he came near, right, hatred had already matured, right, into premeditated violence. They knew they were going to be violent towards him. So we see that sin grows in stages, right? First started with dislike, right? Then they became envious, right? Then there was resentment, right? And then conspiracy, right? And notice what they say. Let us see what becomes of his dreams, right? In that sentence, they aren't just attacking Joseph, right? In a sense, they're attacking God. They're challenging God, right? Because those dreams had come from God, right? They think they can kill the promise that God has delivered, right? And the stripping of the robe was symbolic, right? They were removing what reminded them of favor and destiny, right? But destiny isn't, stitched into fabric, right? Reuben tries compromise, right? Not righteousness, right? So even when evil is clear, right, the half measures fail, right? We've seen that theme throughout Genesis. You can't be half obedient, right? You can't be, half. You can't be half and half, right? It never works out. Verse 25. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. Right, so the brothers sit down to eat while Joseph is still in this pit. Right, Judah suggests selling him instead of killing him. Right, so they sell Joseph for 20 shekels of silver to traders that are heading to Egypt. Right, they sat down to eat. Right, Joseph is crying in a pit, right, and they're having lunch. Right, that's what hardened sin looks like. Right, and Judah's idea here, right, it sounds more humane, selling him, but it's still betrayal. Right, selling their brother into slavery while saying he is our flesh, it's a moral contradiction, right? It doesn't make sense. And notice where Joseph is going to, right? Egypt. Right, this isn't random, right? This is, providence, right? The brothers thinking that they're eliminating a threat. However, God is relocating, right, a leader. So you cannot sabotage divine purpose, right? You can only become a part of how it unfolds. Verse 29. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I'll continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him. Right, so Reuben returns and panics. Right, the brothers kill a goat, they dip the robe in the blood, and they deceive Jacob into believing that Joseph was killed by a wild animal. Right, and Jacob mourns deeply, right, and he refuses any type of comfort. Right, notice the symmetry. Right, Jacob deceived his father with the goat skin. Now his sons deceive him with goat blood. Right, Jacob's grief is real. Right, the son's comfort, right, is fake. Right, their silence is cruelty. Right, just layered onto deception. But there's something deeper here, right? Jacob assumes that Joseph is dead. However, God knows Joseph is exactly where he needs him, right? So from heaven's view, right, from God's view, this isn't a tragedy. This is, positioning. But no one on earth can see that. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. Right, so Joseph is sold to Potiphar, right, who's an officer of the Pharaoh. So Joseph moves from favored son to now he's a slave, right, overnight. Right, there's no real warning, no explanation, right, just immediate justice, right. Yet this verse is, the hinge of Genesis, right. Egypt is not punishment, it's more a preparation, right. Joseph now must learn, right, administration, right, authority structures, has to learn Egyptian language, right, crisis management, all before he becomes a ruler, right. So God often sends people into places that you may think or it looks like a setback, right, but they're actually just training grounds, right. The brothers think that, they've ended the dream. However, they unknowingly, right, they've advanced it. So it's kind of ironic. We're going to end there on Genesis chapter 37. Right, we'll do 38 next video. Thank you guys if you've listened this far. I appreciate it. May God bless you all, protect you, keep you safe. Alright, I'll see you next video.